At one of the most luxurious airports, a black man named Andre Collins, dressed impeccably, takes his seat in first class, a seat he paid for himself. But suddenly, a wealthy white woman storms down the aisle, demanding his seat, claiming that it has always been hers, simply because she is a VIP customer of the airline. The entire flight crew sides with her without question. They bluntly ask Andre to change seats, even calling airport security to force him off the plane. But what no one on board realizes is that Andre is not just a passenger. He is the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar tech company and the second largest shareholder of the airline. And he is about to end their careers and shut down the entire airport for the next 72 hours. Before we continue, I would like to know where in the world you are watching this story from. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below and be sure to subscribe so you never miss out on inspiring and impactful stories like this one. The boarding gate buzzed with the controlled chaos of a high-end international terminal, its polished floors gleaming under soft golden lights, ambient music playing just above the hum of voices. Passengers in tailored suits and designer scarves moved with calculated ease, their luggage gliding silently beside them. Gate A-17 of Orlando Skyport bore the shimmering Nova Air logo, a silver phoenix mid-flight promising luxury precision and prestige. Beyond the gate, the Nova Air NX-900 awaited a long-haul luxury aircraft renowned for its 5-star first-class service, where seats were less about comfort and more about status. Andre Collins was a tall, commanding figure with rich, deep brown skin that caught the cabin light like polished mahogany. His complexion was smooth and radiant, a quiet defiance to every stereotype the world had ever tried to press upon him. Andre Collins moved with calm assurance as he stepped onto the aircraft, his hand resting lightly on the handle of a black leather briefcase. Dressed in a navy blazer over a soft gray turtleneck, no flashy logos or unnecessary flair, his presence radiated quiet power. His posture was straight, his eyes observant, deep brown, and thoughtful. At 41, Andre had the self-possession of someone who had fought hard to own every space he stepped into and the humility of someone who had never forgotten what it cost to get there. He reached his seat 1B window side and settled in, placing his briefcase under the seat in front of him. The cabin was immaculate cream leather seats, brushed chrome finishes, and individual touchscreens glowing faintly with personalized welcome messages. He pulled out a sleek tablet and opened a document titled Global Ethics and AI Summit Keynote Draft. With the flight expected to last just under 8 hours, Andre had chosen 1B specifically for the window light and privacy ideal conditions to finalize the speech that would set the tone for an international conversation about justice in technology. Moments later, a voice warm but edged with protocol broke his concentration. "Excuse me, sir," said Chloe Barnes, the lead flight attendant. Her uniform was impeccable midnight blue, with gold trim, not a wrinkle in sight. Her smile was practiced, her tone professional, but Andre immediately sensed a quiet tension in her posture. "We have a regular client who usually occupies this specific seat. Would you be willing to exchange it for another first-class seat?" Andre looked up mildly puzzled. "I believe this is my assigned seat," he replied politely, lifting the corner of his boarding pass to show 1B marked clearly next to his name. "I booked it specifically." Chloe hesitated only a moment before smiling again, though this time there was a subtle edge to it. "Yes, of course I see that. It's just that, well, Miss Langford, one of our long-standing prestige guests, has flown with us for years and typically prefers this exact seat. She's rather particular." As if summoned by cue, Beatrice Langford appeared at the front of the cabin, her heels clicking authoritatively against the aisle carpeting. She wore a flowing red silk travel robe over a crisp white jumpsuit, her platinum hair styled in waves that hadn't moved since the 90s. A diamond brooch glinted on her lapel. Without asking, she stepped slightly forward, her eyes scanning Andre's seat with the disapproval of someone who'd found an intruder in her garden. "I always sit there," she said, her voice loud enough for half the cabin to hear, though her tone feigned indifference. "Nova Air knows this. I've flown this route twice a month for the last 5 years. It's practically my seat." Andre blinked not angrily, just astonished. His brow furrowed. Was this real? He looked back to Chloe, who now shifted her weight, clearly uncomfortable, but standing firm in her ask. "I understand," Andre replied, his voice calm but firm. "But I am also a Nova Prestige Diamond member. I booked this seat weeks in advance. It's not a suggestion. It's a confirmed assignment." He reached into his blazer pocket and pulled out his sleek silver membership card, placing it gently atop his boarding pass. The diamond logo shimmered beneath the cabin light. For a moment, Chloe faltered. Her fingers twitched slightly as she reached to take the card, then pulled back. She smiled tightly, glanced at Beatrice, who stood frozen with polite fury, and gave a shallow nod. "Understood," she said, her voice clipped. "Please enjoy your flight." But the tension lingered like static in the air. Beatrice turned without a word, walking slowly back toward the galley, the hem of her silk robe brushing against the edges of seats as she passed. A few passengers nearby exchanged glances, the kind that communicated volumes without a single word. One of them, a young woman in her 20s, with a dark pixie cut and oversized headphones slung around her neck, suddenly raised her phone and began recording. Not the drama, but the details. Andre's poise, Beatrice's sneer, Chloe's shifting posture. It was the kind of instinct people had developed in a world where injustice was too often denied without proof. Andre, meanwhile, said nothing. He returned his card and passed to his pocket, adjusted the tablet in his lap, and resumed reading his keynote notes. But there was a shift in the atmosphere now. An invisible wall had gone up. He wasn't just a businessman preparing a speech. He was a target of entitlement, of assumptions, of the quiet discrimination that didn't shout but whispered. He had encountered it before, and he knew better than to raise his voice. That was the mistake people often made when they were angry but had no power. Andre Collins had power, and this time it would matter. From the corner of his eye, Andre caught a flicker of movement. Beatrice Langford reaching up toward the overhead compartment, though her carry-on had already been stowed by a junior flight attendant moments earlier. She moved deliberately slowly, as if unsure of what she was looking for. Chloe stood just beside her, watching in what seemed like idle attentiveness. But what happened next wasn't idle at all. As Beatrice reached for the compartment latch, her other hand slipped smoothly into her handbag and withdrew a neatly folded stack of bills. With the grace of someone who had clearly done this before, she slid the cash into the small side pocket of Chloe's blazer, her lips parting in a whisper, only loud enough for a trained ear. "Let's make this easy for both of us, dear. I need that seat." Chloe didn't respond immediately. Her face remained composed, but her hand instinctively moved to adjust her blazer, brushing the new weight in her pocket as though confirming its presence. She turned her gaze toward 1B, and though her expression didn't change, something had. Andre was focused on his tablet, rereading a paragraph about the moral obligation of artificial intelligence to avoid bias in its design. The irony wasn't lost on him. He just hadn't realized how quickly that irony would surface. A moment later, a new figure approached. He moved with the slow precision of someone used to being obeyed. Michael Avery, cabin supervisor for Nova Air's first-class division, was a man who valued hierarchy over nuance. In his early 40s, he carried himself like a man still clinging to the weight of a title. His dark gray uniform immaculately pressed his name badge, gleaming beneath the cabin lights. His blonde hair was combed rigidly back, his square jaw clenched even in neutrality. But it was his eyes, cool assessing, and tinged with something colder, that spoke volumes before he said a word. Mr. Collins Michael began stopping just short of Andre's seat. His voice was formal, clipped, as if he were announcing the start of a disciplinary hearing. "I understand there's been a bit of confusion regarding your seat assignment." Andre looked up slowly, his face still composed. "No confusion on my part," he said evenly, folding his tablet closed. "I'm in my assigned seat, booked, confirmed, and platinum verified." Michael gave a tight, almost condescending smile. "Yes, well, sometimes we have situations where certain high-priority passengers, those with deep history with our airline, prefer specific accommodations. We try to respect that when possible. Miss Langford is one of those passengers." Andre didn't blink. "So am I." Michael didn't respond immediately. He shifted slightly, a subtle attempt at towering just enough to impose authority. "Let me be frank, Mr. Collins. Miss Langford is a very important client. She has contributed significantly to our loyalty programs, and she expects a level of consistency. Seat 1B is part of that expectation." Andre tilted his head slightly, eyes narrowing just a fraction. His voice remained low, deliberate. "Are you asking me to move? Or telling me?" Michael's lips curled into something that resembled a smile, but lacked all warmth. "We're requesting your cooperation, of course. But as lead supervisor, I do have the authority to reassign seating at my discretion." Behind Michael, two passengers had paused their conversations. One was a young Asian woman wearing a tailored green blazer, her expression shifting from mild interest to unease. The other, a Latino businessman in his 40s, seated across the aisle, raised an eyebrow and glanced down at his phone, casually tapping the record button. Andre leaned back slightly in his seat, folded his hands over his lap, and looked directly at Michael. His voice was calm, but beneath it steel. "I'm not opposed to moving Michael. I've moved for parents traveling with kids, for elderly passengers, for people with actual needs." He paused, letting the weight of his next words land with precision. "What bothers me is why you're asking me to move." Michael stiffened. Andre continued, "You're not asking out of policy. You're asking out of preference, hers, not mine. You want me to give up my seat because someone else is louder, wealthier, or more familiar. And maybe because she looks more like someone who belongs here." The words hung in the air like smoke. No accusation, no outrage, just clarity. The cabin was silent now, save for the quiet hum of the aircraft systems and the rustling of a few pages turning elsewhere. Chloe, standing behind Michael, looked down, her expression unreadable. Beatrice Langford remained in the galley, watching from a distance, like a director waiting to see if her cue would land. The woman in the green blazer shook her head subtly, muttering to herself, "This is not okay." The man with the phone lifted it just an inch higher. Michael shifted his weight again, the tightness in his jaw returning. "I'm simply trying to make everyone comfortable." Andre didn't flinch. "Then perhaps you should ask her to move." There was no raised voice, no flash of defiance, only the steady firmness of a man who'd had enough of being asked to yield ground he had already earned. "I'm not inconvenienced by the seat change," Andre said quietly. "I'm inconvenienced by the reason behind it." It was a line that would later be quoted millions of times. But in that moment, it wasn't delivered for applause. It was spoken with the kind of unwavering presence that forced people to stop and ask themselves, "Why are we really doing this?" Michael said nothing, his mouth a thin line. He gave a curt nod, turned on his heel, and walked back up the aisle. The moment passed, but the tension remained tangible, undeniable. Andre reopened his tablet, but this time he wasn't reading. He was waiting, because he knew from years of hard-earned wisdom that this wasn't over. A few minutes passed, long enough for Andre to scan a single page of his presentation without absorbing a single word. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin had shifted not loud, but alert, like the stillness before a summer storm. Conversations had quieted into murmurs. Glances darted toward seat 1B and back again, and the young man across the aisle had his phone still angled, just enough to record his finger steady on the screen. Something unspoken had taken root in the air, the sense that a line had been crossed, and another was about to be drawn. Then came the sound of deliberate footsteps, firm, measured, approaching from the front of the aircraft. It wasn't Michael this time. It was a taller figure, older, carrying not just authority, but a kind of finality. Captain Victor Klein, the man responsible for Nova Air's flagship transatlantic routes, appeared at the cabin threshold. He was 60, with silver-streaked hair neatly combed back, and the carved dignity of someone who had spent decades mastering storm schedules and diplomacy in the sky. His uniform bore 4 gold bars on the shoulder, and his face, thin-lipped, stern, was unreadable. Behind him trailed Chloe and Michael, their postures stiffer now, like students expecting a reprimand, but not knowing if they'd get one or give one. "Mr. Collins," Captain Klein said as he arrived beside Andre's seat. His voice was low, smooth, and heavily accented Swiss German, underlying every syllable. "My crew has briefed me on the situation." Andre looked up calm as ever. "And what situation is that, Captain?" The captain took a breath, the kind that buys time and suppresses doubt. "We have a disruption in the cabin," he said. "Several passengers are uncomfortable. In the interest of safety and comfort, I must ask you to change seats or disembark the aircraft voluntarily." Andre blinked slowly. "You're asking me to leave because someone is uncomfortable with me being in the seat I was assigned with the ticket I paid for under the rules I followed." The captain's expression didn't change. "This is not about fault. It is about resolving conflict before it escalates." Andre's lips pressed together. "There is no conflict. I haven't raised my voice. I haven't stood up. I haven't broken a single rule. I've only done one thing, not move when someone asked me to give up what I rightfully reserved, and that's what makes them uncomfortable." Captain Klein hesitated the silence, giving space for something far more dangerous, Beatrice Langford's voice. From several feet back, her words rang out with the self-righteousness of the entitled. "This is absolutely outrageous," she said, one manicured hand clutching her silk scarf like a flag. "He's been combative since I boarded. I don't feel safe sharing a cabin with someone so disrespectful." Murmurs swelled. A few passengers visibly winced. The young Asian woman in the green blazer frowned sharply. The man with the phone leaned forward. Andre took a breath, not one of weariness, but of decision. Slowly he reached into the inner pocket of his blazer and pulled out his phone. With calm fingers, he opened the camera app and tapped record. He held the phone in his lap, angled slightly upward, his voice measured and clear. "I am now recording this interaction," he said, directing the words at the captain. "I want to document that I, Andre Collins, Nova Prestige Diamond member, am being asked to leave a seat. I paid for a seat I was assigned without any violation of airline policy, simply because another passenger who is not staff prefers to sit here." Captain Klein's gaze darkened. "Sir, filming crew members is not allowed." Andre's eyes didn't waver. Actually, under FAA regulations, recording is permitted on board an aircraft as long as it does not interfere with safety procedures or crew duties, which this doesn't. He tapped the phone again, ensuring the video was saved. The captain said nothing. Chloe looked down. Michael looked away. Beatrice, emboldened, took a step closer and said with mock exasperation, "See, aggressive, condescending, and now filming us like some activist trying to stir up trouble. This is what I meant. I don't feel safe." Andre didn't even glance at her. "You're not unsafe," he said quietly. "You're uncomfortable. And the difference between those two things has cost people like me more than you'll ever understand." The silence that followed was shattered by movement near the back of first class. A uniformed pair entered the cabin, 2 airport security officers summoned without fanfare, but impossible to ignore. Their steps were swift, their expressions blank professional. One was tall, with dark skin and a radio clipped to his vest. The other, shorter and broader, had a clipboard in hand. Neither looked particularly interested in hearing context. Their eyes scanned the row locked on Andre and nodded subtly toward Captain Klein. "This, the passenger?" the tall one asked. The captain gave a quiet nod. "Mr. Collins," the officer began, his voice neutral. "We've been asked to escort you off the aircraft." Andre stood slowly still, holding his phone in hand. His voice didn't shake. "Understood. But before I leave, I'd like you to state clearly on camera why I'm being removed." The officer hesitated. "We were told there was a disturbance." "Was I loud, violent, breaking rules?" Andre asked. "No, sir." "Was anyone else asked to move before me?" "No, sir." Andre turned toward the rows behind him, the passengers who had silently watched everything unfold. "Just so we're clear, I am being removed because I wouldn't give up a seat I paid for to someone who felt more entitled to it." A beat of silence. Then, from the third row, a voice broke through. "If he's going, I'm going too." All heads turned. It was the woman in the green blazer, the young Asian passenger who had watched everything, said nothing until now. She stood, her voice ringing with conviction. "This is wrong. I saw the whole thing. He didn't do anything. You're punishing him for not bending to privilege." A few other passengers murmured in agreement. Beatrice gasped, turning red. "Oh, come on, he's making a scene." The Latino woman sitting behind Beatrice leaned forward. "The only scene here is you throwing a fit because you didn't get your favorite chair." The officers hesitated, clearly aware this was no longer a quiet removal. Phones were out. Recordings were rolling. This wasn't just a customer being ejected. This was a line in the sand. Andre turned to the standing woman, his voice softer now. "You don't have to know." She cut him off. "But I want to." Andre nodded, quietly touched. Then he faced the officers, adjusted the strap on his briefcase, and said, "Let's go." As he moved past the rows, a few passengers nodded at him. Not all, but enough to say, "We saw. We know. And maybe we'll remember." Behind him, Captain Klein said nothing. Michael's lips were pursed. Chloe was pale, her eyes fixed on the floor. Beatrice. She exhaled through her nose dramatically, retaking her seat in 1B, as though it had finally been returned to her. But what no one in that cabin realized was that the seat she reclaimed was about to become the most expensive one she'd ever sit in. The glass doors of the private executive lounge at Orlando Skyport slid shut behind Andre with a quiet hiss. He walked with unhurried purpose, the same calm dignity he had maintained inside the cabin, now reinforced by the silence of the room. The plush leather chairs, polished oak tables, and the muted jazz playing overhead did little to dull the fire quietly building inside him. This wasn't the first time he'd been forced to swallow indignity. But it might very well be the last time anyone mistook his silence for surrender. He opened his phone and tapped through to his encrypted messaging app. With precise, deliberate motions, he attached the raw footage from the incident, followed by a short text message. No flourish, no emotion, just a statement and a warning. To Elise Chief Operating Officer Equisys, "We were just removed from a plane for being Andre Collins. They don't know who we are. Yet." He hit send. Across the city, in a sleek, glass-walled office 37 stories above downtown Miami, the headquarters of Nova Air pulsed with the usual hum of corporate efficiency until the crisis hit like a lightning bolt. In the corner office overlooking Biscayne Bay, Lisa Grant stared at her tablet, blinking once, then again as her assistant burst through the door. "Ma'am," he said, breathless, "we have a situation urgent." Lisa was no stranger to crises. At 39, she had climbed the ranks of Nova Air faster than any woman in the company's history. Sharp, pragmatic, and fiercely composed, she had built her reputation by solving problems before they ignited. But today, she was already on edge. She was hours away from finalizing a monumental deal, an $80 million digital transformation contract with Equisys, the AI company known for rewriting the rules of customer experience. What kind of situation, she asked, already reaching for her phone. The assistant hesitated, then turned the tablet screen toward her. It was a video grainy shot from a passenger's phone, but the content was crystal clear. The first-class cabin, a black man being surrounded by airline crew. Calm, polite, refusing to give up his seat. An older white woman demanding it. Flight attendants complying. Security arriving. The man stating his name. Holding up his boarding pass. The tension, the insult, the removal. And then the quote that broke the internet. "I'm not bothered by the seat change. I'm bothered by the reason you want me to move." Lisa didn't speak. She knew exactly what she was looking at. She knew the airline's uniform, the flight number, the gate. She recognized Chloe's face, Michael's voice, Beatrice Langford's infamous entitled tone. But mostly, she recognized the man being removed, at least now as the name began flooding the internet. Her assistant's voice cut through her thoughts. "The video is blowing up. 4 million views in the last 2 hours. Twitter, TikTok, Reddit, Instagram, it's everywhere." "Who's the passenger?" Lisa asked, even though she already knew. The assistant swallowed. "Andre Collins." She closed her eyes. "That Andre Collins." He nodded. "Equisys, our top prospect." Also, new records show his holding group now owns 27% of Nova Air. He's not just a VIP. He's our second largest shareholder. Lisa's stomach sank. In the conference room next door, the crisis communications team had already convened. Half the screens displayed social media dashboards. The other half showed the video playing on loop. Analysts were tracking sentiment. Comments scrolled down the walls like digital graffiti. "This is disgusting. This is why people record everything." He paid. He was calm. And they still dragged him out. "Tell me this isn't about race. I dare you." And from the verified account of a prominent journalist, Nova Air just removed Andre Collins from a flight. "That's right, the Andre Collins. You think this won't have consequences?" Lisa moved swiftly into the room, all eyes turning toward her as she entered. "Tell me where we stand," she said without preamble. Her head of PR, a woman in her 50s who looked like she'd aged 10 years in the last hour, responded. "The video's gone viral. The story has jumped to CNN's front page. The hashtags #FlyWhileBlack and #NovaDiscrimination are trending number 1 and 2. Collins hasn't released a statement, but sources say he's already meeting with his legal team." Lisa turned to the compliance officer. "Why didn't we catch this at boarding?" "We didn't flag him," he admitted. "Our systems didn't even list him as a priority guest, let alone a major shareholder." Her fingers curled into a fist. She knew why. Andre booked flights under an alias tied to his holding company, a practice many high-profile executives used for privacy. But someone with authority should have known. Back at the airport, Andre sat in the executive lounge, his expression unreadable as he reviewed a flood of messages from board members, media contacts, and his own team. Then his phone buzzed again, this time from an unknown number. A new message from Sophia Morales. "I was the passenger across the aisle. I recorded everything. It's clear with audio. I'm sending you the full footage now. Let me know if I can testify. I'm sorry this happened. You didn't deserve it." Attached was a file over 8 minutes of footage, crystal clear, capturing not just the confrontation, but the pivotal moment when Beatrice quietly slipped the cash into Chloe's blazer pocket. Andre watched the clip in silence, rewinding, listening, isolating each line. He didn't react. He didn't rage. He simply hit save and filed it under a folder titled Evidence Nova Air 0425. Then, without a moment's pause, he tapped a number on speed dial. "Elise," he said when his COO picked up. "Bring in legal. Notify corporate relations. I want a full shareholder emergency meeting called within the hour. And tell Lisa Grant." The clock just started ticking. Across the country inside Nova Air's executive boardroom, Lisa stared at the growing numbers on the crisis dashboard. Stock was down 8.4% and still falling. Institutional investors were calling. News anchors were demanding interviews. Protest groups were organizing boycotts. And the man they had just insulted quietly, publicly, and irrevocably was about to become their reckoning. Lisa lowered her voice and turned to her chief of staff. "Get me Andre Collins, now." The conference room at Nova Air's global headquarters had never been this silent. The walls were soundproofed, the chairs upholstered in sleek black leather, the table long enough to seat 20 executives, but no one dared shift in their seats. The usual confidence of a corporate boardroom, polished, rehearsed, steely, had evaporated. The air now buzzed with something far heavier fear. Lisa Grant sat at the head of the table, her jaw tight, her eyes locked on the large central screen, which now displayed the title slide of a presentation that no one in the room had ever wanted to see. Emergency Shareholder Meeting, 11:00 a.m. Vertical Bar, Subject Equity Accountability and Cultural Integrity. Then the door opened. Andre Collins entered with quiet command, dressed in the same outfit from the day before, a deliberate decision. The navy blazer, the soft gray turtleneck, the calm in his walk, unchanged. He didn't need a costume to declare war. He brought with him Elise Thompson, Equisys COO, and 2 other members of his executive team. None of them carried paper. Everything they needed was already in the system. The truth was now the most powerful file they possessed. Lisa stood as he entered. "Mr. Collins, Andre," she began, but he lifted a hand slightly, not rudely, but decisively. "Let's skip the preamble," he said, taking his seat across from her. "We're already on the clock." A few board members exchanged glances, unsure whether to lean in or look away. Andre didn't wait. He tapped a button on his tablet, and the first video began to play on the screen, a seamless, high-definition recording. The cabin, the voices, the faces, the removal. Beatrice, Chloe, Michael, Captain Klein, all caught in perfect clarity from Sophia Morales' angle. Every word, every action. Then came the close-up, the crisp, damning moment where Beatrice, with calculated ease, slipped money into Chloe's blazer pocket. The still frame froze on screen. Gasps echoed. One board member swore under his breath. Andre leaned back. "I have 2 things," he said, his voice low but resonant, cutting through the silence like a scalpel. "One is a demand. The other is a decision." No one interrupted. "My demand is simple: the immediate termination of all employees directly involved in the incident: Chloe Barnes, Michael Avery, and Captain Victor Klein. Second, a formal public apology from Nova Air acknowledging the discriminatory nature of the incident, addressed not just to me, but to every passenger who has ever been silently humiliated without a camera to prove it. And third, mandatory system-wide training on implicit bias accountability and ethical service to be developed and implemented under the guidance of Equisys." A pause. He let the weight of it hang for a moment, then continued. "My decision," he said, "depends on yours." He folded his hands. "If these steps are not taken immediately and without negotiation, Equisys will withdraw from the pending digital transformation contract valued at $80 million effective today. Additionally, I will initiate a strategic divestment of our 27% equity holdings. Within 48 hours, Nova Air stock will begin hemorrhaging on every index, and every institutional investor who's been waiting to see if we're still aligned will follow." A cold sweat settled over the room. Lisa inhaled slowly, her throat tight. "Andre," she began, "I understand the gravity of this situation, and I want to be clear that Do you, Andre, interrupted not with anger, but with a cutting clarity. Because I don't believe this was a situation. I believe it was a system. A culture built on rewarding familiarity, accommodating entitlement, and tolerating quiet prejudice until it became loud." Michael Avery, seated off to the side, shifted uncomfortably. His face had turned a deep shade of red, and his jaw clenched. With all due respect, he muttered, "This is being blown way out of proportion. That woman Beatrice, she's flown this route for years. I was just trying to keep her calm. That's my job." Andre turned toward him slowly. "Your job is to enforce policy, not hierarchy, disguised as loyalty. You accepted a bribe on camera, Michael. That's not proportion, that's proof. Michael opened his mouth, but Elise, cool as glass, cut in first. Would you like us to play it again in slow motion? Lisa raised a hand. Enough. Her voice cracked slightly under the pressure. Michael, Chloe, Captain Klein, you're on administrative leave, effective immediately pending formal termination. Legal will process your exits by end of day. Chloe, seated farther down, closed her eyes. Klein said nothing, his expression stone. Michael opened his mouth again, then shut it, deflated. Andre didn't gloat. He just looked back to Lisa. And the public statement. She nodded. We'll draft it today. You'll have final review. Andre gave a single nod of approval, then stood. Lisa remained seated. Before you go, she said quietly, her voice stripped of corporate polish, I want to say something as a human being, not a CEO. He paused. We thought we were courting a tech company, she admitted, voice hollow. Turns out we were being evaluated by it. We revealed who we were without even realizing who was watching. Andre's gaze didn't soften, but it steadied respectfully. You weren't the only ones, he said, but you were the loudest. And then he left the door, closing behind him, like the final page of a report no one wanted filed. On the crisis dashboard, the numbers ticked downward. Nova Air stock, now down 15.3%. But in that boardroom, for the first time in years, something had shifted. Not just panic, but awareness. Accountability had finally entered the airspace. 72 hours. That was the number that shocked the entire aviation industry when Nova Air made the unprecedented announcement. Effective immediately, all flights across Nova Air's global network would be grounded for 3 full days. Over 12,000 employees, from pilots to baggage handlers, from executive directors to frontline agents, were being pulled into mandatory training. It was the first time a major airline had ever voluntarily suspended operations, not for weather, not for technical failure, but for a moral reset. The press called it corporate self-surgery. Some mocked it as a PR stunt. But inside Nova Air, the silence of grounded aircraft echoed louder than takeoff engines ever had. And at the center of it all stood Andre Collins. He wasn't just the man who had been wronged. He was now the architect of Nova Air's transformation. In the week following the emergency board meeting, his team at Equisys had begun deploying ClearLens, a proprietary AI-driven platform designed to detect and flag patterns of bias in customer interactions. The system would monitor everything: booking data service patterns, complaint histories, even the tone of employee notes. Not to punish, but to reveal, to reflect the reality so many companies refuse to look at, until it exploded in their faces. Lisa Grant stood beside Andre as they entered Nova Air's main training facility, a massive space once used for aircraft safety simulations, now converted into a theater of reckoning. Rows of employees sat in silence, some defensive, others quietly ashamed, most unsure of what to expect. There were no corporate banners, no slogans on the walls, just a single phrase projected across a white screen: "We saw it. Now what will we do?" Andre took the stage with no introduction, no slides, no dramatics, just a microphone and his presence. He looked around the room, slowly meeting eyes without flinching. Then he began. "I was born in the Oak Bridge projects," he said, voice steady. "Southside Detroit, one of those neighborhoods you never see on postcards, but you hear about in the news when something goes wrong. My mother worked nights. My dad was a mechanic. I've been followed in department stores more times than I can count." Andre continued, voice steady, but laced with quiet weight. "I remember once I was 16, wearing a school uniform, holding a math textbook, and the security guard still tailed me like I was about to steal a pack of gum. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. His eyes said it all. You don't belong here." A few employees looked up from their notepads, visibly shifting in their seats. "I've walked into job interviews where the room froze the second they saw my face. One manager I'll never forget. This glanced at my resume, looked me in the eye, and said, 'You wrote this. It's very articulate.' Like it was a compliment, like intelligence was unexpected." He paused, letting the words breathe. "I once got pulled over for driving the car I'd just bought with my first software paycheck. Cop asked me if it was stolen. I said no, offered my license, insurance, registration, everything in order. Still made me get out, handcuffed me while he checked some things. 27 minutes on the side of the highway, cars rushing past, some people slowing down just to watch. You ever seen people look at you like you're a threat before you even speak? That's what it's like. That's what it does to you." His eyes moved slowly across the room, making sure no one could look away. "And it doesn't stop when you succeed. It just changes form. It becomes polite, subtle, dressed in business casual. I've pitched million-dollar ideas to rooms where I was the only black face and had to answer questions twice because they didn't hear me the first time. Not because I was unclear, but because bias is loud even when it's silent. He stepped forward slightly closer to the edge of the stage now. Let me tell you something I've never said publicly before. I've walked into boardrooms where I own the largest stake and still got mistaken for the driver. I've had hotel staff hand my room key to my white assistant. I've had people congratulate me for being so well-spoken at investor events, as if being articulate was some rare mutation. Laughter didn't follow. No one moved. I built my company Equisys to give businesses the tools to recognize these patterns. Because they're everywhere. In software, in service, in how we're trained, in who we choose to believe. And that's what makes what happened on your plane last week so powerful. Because it wasn't the worst thing I've been through. It wasn't violent. It wasn't loud. It was ordinary. He let that word hang. That's the danger, that we've normalized bias to the point where someone like me being removed from a seat he paid for seems procedural. That's why I'm standing here. Not to shame, not to punish, but to show. And if even one of you walks away from this training seeing people differently, hearing them better, then maybe, just maybe, this grounding wasn't a loss. He finally looked toward Lisa, then back at the sea of employees. Let me say this again. No one should need a camera to be treated like a human being. But if one day someone does, be the person who doesn't look away. And this time when the silence broke, it wasn't with applause. It was with stillness, a different kind. The kind that came not from guilt, but from awakening. We didn't have internet, but we had a neighbor with a broken-down computer he let me mess with when I was 11. I didn't know what code was. I just knew it was the first time something made sense that didn't require me to fight for space. He paused, letting that settle. I built my first software program on a second-hand gateway. Got laughed at the first time I submitted it to a local contest because no one believed I'd written it. A black kid from the projects talking about algorithms must have stolen it. Right. Some employees shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Andre didn't flinch. I built Equisys because I got tired of being surprised every time someone said, "You speak so well." Or, "You're not what I expected." Or, "I didn't mean anything by it." Bias isn't always loud. Sometimes it's polite. Sometimes it smiles at you as it hands your seat to someone else. The room was completely still. I didn't come here for revenge. I came here for repair, he said, his voice softening. I know what happens when good people stay quiet, when policies protect comfort instead of truth. Clear lens won't punish you. It'll show you what you've been trained not to see. And from there, you get to choose what kind of professional, what kind of person you want to be. He stepped forward slightly, but let me say one thing plainly, and I hope you never forget it. No one should have to record a video to be treated like a human being. A hush fell so deep that even breath seemed to pause. Eyes welled, hands clenched. Some looked down. Others, for the first time, looked inward. Over the course of 3 days, Andre spoke at every single regional hub: London, Singapore, Sao Paulo, Denver. He met with crews, sat in simulator rooms, joined ground staff at lunch, walked hangars at midnight. Not as a shareholder, not as a CEO, but as a man who'd been asked to move, who instead chose to stand. Meanwhile, Clear Lens rolled out in stages. The system connected to every customer service terminal and internal report began analyzing years of behavior patterns. Flags popped up not just for discriminatory incidents, but for subtler forms, calls transferred faster, for certain names, upgrade denials, the language used in staff notes like difficult, pushy, uncooperative patterns that, when aggregated, told a story far more insidious than a single viral video ever could. Nova Air released its formal apology the morning of the second day. Not a corporate 2-paragraph statement. A full video narrated by Lisa Grant with direct acknowledgement of the wrong done, the culture that allowed it, and the faces, Andre's included, of those leading the change. It aired unskippable before every Nova Air booking video and ran as a full-page ad in major newspapers globally. The video opens in silence. No dramatic music. Just a black screen with the Nova Air logo slowly fading into a clean white background. Then Lisa Grant appears standing alone in the center of the frame. No podium, no backdrop of an airplane hangar, no polished script in her hand. She wears a dark blazer over a pale blouse. Her expression is calm but resolute. Her voice, when she begins, is low and clear. My name is Lisa Grant. I'm the CEO of Nova Air. She pauses not out of hesitation but intention. Then she continues. Last week, one of our passengers, Mr. Andre Collins, was asked to leave one of our aircraft. He held a confirmed ticket. He held the highest level of membership in our loyalty program. He followed every rule, and yet he was treated as if he didn't belong. Another pause. Her eyes never leave the camera. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a miscommunication. This was bias, clear and unmistakable. It was rooted in assumptions, in comfort, in silence. And that bias does not reflect the values we say we hold, but it does reflect the culture we allowed to grow. The screen briefly cuts to quiet black and white still images Andre's face, solemn as he stood in the aisle, a blurred frame of Beatrice, the disbelieving expressions of fellow passengers, the overhead bin, the folded cash. Back to Lisa. We failed Mr. Collins, but more than that, we failed our passengers, our employees, ourselves. She folds her hands in front of her. Over the past few days, you may have seen headlines, videos, commentary. What we want to say today is simple. We are sorry, not just for what happened to Mr. Collins, but for every moment when someone on our flights felt unseen, unheard, or unwelcome because of who they are. Then her voice steadies. Nova Air has grounded every flight for 72 hours to retrain every one of our team members from executives to cabin crew. We are partnering with Equisys to deploy ClearLens, a platform that will help us detect and dismantle bias before it can take flight. The video now fades into brief clips, training sessions in progress, employees in group discussions, new policy guidelines being reviewed. Lisa's voice returns over these images. This is not about damage control. It's about cultural transformation. We will not return to the skies until we are ready to serve every passenger with equal dignity. We're not doing this because we got caught. We're doing this because it's overdue. Back to Lisa. She stands taller now. Her final words are delivered without tremble. To Mr. Collins, you should have never been made to prove your humanity. And to anyone watching, we are listening, we are learning, and we are changing. You deserve nothing less. The screen fades to white again. Then a single line appears. No passenger should ever need a camera to be treated like a person. Passengers noticed. Comment sections filled with stories from people who'd experienced smaller, quieter versions of what Andre had endured. Staff, many of whom had never seen their executives admit fault, began to speak openly in training sessions. Bias wasn't a buzzword anymore. It was personal, measurable, and actionable. And somewhere quietly, something began to heal. On the final day of the grounding, Andre stood again in the Miami training hall. This time, 1,000 employees stood with him. A line of pilots, flight attendants, technicians, and directors lined the stage behind him, not as props, but as participants. Lisa stepped forward. We used to say we were a world-class airline, she began. Now we'll start proving we're a world-class people company. Thanks to this man, we have the mirror. Now we build the better reflection. As applause broke out, slow, genuine rising like a tide, Andre said nothing. He just nodded once, then stepped back, letting the people own the moment. Not because the fight was over, but because, for the first time, the fight was shared. It didn't happen overnight. The transformation inside Nova Air wasn't the result of a single speech, a viral video, or a public apology. It was the slow, uncomfortable human process of becoming different, not just in appearance, but in consciousness. And it began, as real change always does, with one person deciding to listen. It started with a man named Eric, mid-40s, 10 years as a flight attendant, proud of his record, his efficiency, his people skills. The kind of person who'd always said, "I don't see color," and believed it was a compliment. During Andre's first live training at the Miami hub, Eric sat in the back row, arms crossed his face, set in polite defiance. He watched Andre speak, heard the stories of bias and exclusion, but his posture didn't soften until Andre said something that sliced through his armor. "You can be a good person and still cause harm," Andre had said. "You can mean well and still do damage. The question isn't what you intended. The question is, what did they experience?" Eric didn't move at first, but later that evening, alone in his hotel room, he replayed the phrase again and again. He thought about the passengers he'd once called difficult because they asked too many questions, the ones he assumed were trying to game the system. He thought about the young black man last year who asked for an extra blanket and whom he'd dismissed with a curt, "We're out." He'd told himself it wasn't about race, it was about policy. But what if it was about both? The next morning, Eric sat in the front row. A week later, he volunteered to help facilitate the next training session. And slowly, others followed. Maya, a customer service lead in Chicago, broke down in tears during the microaggressions in professional language module. I thought I was helping when I said things like, "You're so well-spoken," she admitted. "I didn't realize I was saying I expected less." She began calling staff meetings to rework internal communication protocols, how agents referred to passengers in notes, how tone was monitored in complaint logs. She retrained her entire desk team. No one asked her to. She just knew it needed to be done. From there, a team formed. They called themselves the Mirror Crew, a cross-department group of volunteers who began developing peer-to-peer accountability systems, quick-check feedback tools, anonymous reporting channels, not just for safety, but for respect. It spread across hubs, Los Angeles, London, Johannesburg. Someone created badges that read, "I choose to see." They weren't mandatory, but they became a quiet, visible signal that you weren't afraid to confront your own bias. Every time Andre gave a new talk, whether to senior executives in tailored suits or night shift baggage handlers in grease-stained polos, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't dramatize. He didn't shame. He just told the truth. And in doing so, he gave people permission to see themselves differently. "You weren't born biased," he once said. "You were taught where to look. And now you get to choose again." That line changed more people than any slide deck ever could. By the third month, Nova Air's employee town halls had shifted in tone. What started as nervous silences became vulnerable questions, then suggestions, then actions. The Clear Lens feedback system was being used not just as a watchdog tool, but as a learning one. Employees began flagging themselves before the system had to. One pilot left a note in his own file after realizing he'd spoken differently to a white flight attendant than to a black one. Noticing the difference is the first step. I'm working on it. Small actions, quiet reckonings, a ripple, and then something extraordinary happened. Passengers noticed, not just in headline ways, but in tiny, daily, undeniable ways. In the way gate agents now said welcome without glancing at last names first. In the way flight attendants didn't assume who belonged in business class. In the way staff began referring to passengers by name, even when they weren't members of the loyalty program. Nova Air didn't become perfect, but it became aware. And awareness, Andre had said once, was the seed of justice. It all began with one man in the back row, then a team, then a company. And now, with every flight that took off, Nova Air wasn't just taking people from one place to another. It was proving that institutions could evolve, that culture could be rewritten, and that systems weren't built to last forever. Some were built to be rebuilt. 6 months later, Nova Air was almost unrecognizable, not in its branding, not in its fleet, but in something deeper, more difficult to quantify: the way people felt when they stepped onto its planes. The scandal that had once threatened to collapse the company had instead become the catalyst for one of the most profound organizational transformations in modern corporate history. And the world had taken notice. Customer satisfaction scores across all demographics had soared. Internal surveys showed a 42% increase in employee trust toward leadership. Flight attendants who once whispered complaints about overly sensitive passengers were now holding one another accountable in real time. It wasn't perfect, real change never is, but the air inside a Nova Air cabin felt different now. Warmer, fairer, human. At the center of this shift, quietly but undeniably, was a man who had once been told he didn't belong in his own seat. Andre Collins had kept his word. He didn't just expose a problem. He stayed to help rebuild from the rubble. And when it was time to take the work beyond Nova Air, he created something bigger. Lens Forward, a nonprofit initiative focused on helping individuals who had been part of biased systems not just apologize, but transform. It provided education coaching and the rarest gift of all, a second chance. Chloe Barnes was one of the first to apply. She submitted her application without expectation, without press. Her letter was simple, unpolished, and unguarded. She admitted everything: the discomfort she felt that day, the money she accepted, the voice inside her that told her it was wrong, and the silence she chose instead. "I didn't think I had the power to say no," she wrote, "but I did, and I didn't use it. I'm ready to learn how." Lens Forward didn't erase the past, but it offered a bridge to something beyond shame. Chloe was accepted into the first cohort. She completed the intensive 6-week course, participated in live discussion panels, and now works as a ground agent for a small regional airline in Nevada. It's not glamorous, it's not high-paying, But every time she welcomes someone at the gate, she looks them in the eye and calls them by their name, not their status. Michael Avery took longer to come around, defensive at first, then resentful, then eventually quiet. Not defeated, reflective. It was during a session on inherited bias and perceived neutrality that something cracked. He spoke about his father, a veteran airman, who taught him that order matters more than opinion, and how that mantra had blinded him to what order often protected. "I thought I was just doing my job," Michael finally said, "but I wasn't enforcing policy. I was enforcing preference." He now works behind the scenes consulting on procedural design to reduce discretionary bias in gate assignments and upgrades. He doesn't lead. He listens. Captain Victor Klein chose a different path. Retirement was an option, but he refused to leave on shame. Instead, he offered to return not as a pilot, but as a trainer. A man once known for stoicism now stood in front of recruits, speaking openly about accountability, humility, and why rank doesn't excuse silence. "The cockpit teaches you to trust your instruments," he said in one session, "but leadership teaches you to question what those instruments were built to ignore." And then there was Beatrice Langford. Nova Air issued a permanent ban against her within 48 hours of the incident. But the consequences didn't end there. A federal inquiry into her financial dealings revealed years of undisclosed payments to service professionals across multiple airlines and private transport networks, an informal bribery ring masked as gratuity culture. Her name vanished from society pages. Her company severed ties. What once was a seat of assumed power became a mirror she could no longer avoid. Whether she changed remained unclear, but for the first time she was being held accountable. Beatrice Langford didn't think of herself as a bad person. She had always been somebody not just in the way people whispered at charity galas or how her name was featured beneath glossy photos in business magazines, but in the way life always worked for her. The world moved in accordance with her preferences. People deferred, doors opened, seats waited, and if they didn't, she paid for them to do so. That's what power was, wasn't it? Efficiency wrapped in elegance. So when Nova Air banned her permanently from flying with them, it didn't feel like justice. It felt like an insult. When the video of her slipping money to a flight attendant went viral, she called it a manipulated narrative. When reporters began reaching out, she declined every interview and instructed her lawyers to send cease and desist letters to anyone who dared use her name. But the letters didn't stop the storm. She was dragged through comment sections, reduced to a meme. Airline Karen, in a red silk robe, finger-pointed face, twisted in entitlement. Her firm's board voted to suspend her pending an ethics review. Former friends ghosted her PR firms, refused to represent her, and a high-profile interior design magazine quietly pulled a feature that had taken months to prepare. Her name, once synonymous with class, now triggered search results laced with contempt. Still, she told herself she had done nothing wrong, that he had made a scene, that he had used his fame to destroy her reputation. Until one morning, 3 months after the incident, she returned to Orlando Skyport. She wasn't flying. She knew she couldn't. But she went anyway, hoping to speak with someone in person at the Nova Air desk, believing that perhaps if she explained herself calmly, someone would understand. That someone would say, "We miss you, Beatrice," or "This has gone too far." That they'd remember her loyalty, her years of upgrades, her expensive tips. Instead, she found a wall of polite professionalism and firm refusal. "I'm sorry, Miss Langford," the customer service manager said, his voice even. "Your ban remains in place. You can submit a written appeal through the online process." "I am the process?" She snapped, her voice rising without her meaning it to. "I built this airline's first-class standard with my loyalty. I shouldn't have to fill out a form." Passengers around her began to look. She slammed her handbag on the counter. "You're all cowards," she hissed. "He turned you into sheep with a camera and a sob story." Phones lifted, eyes narrowed. A teenage girl nearby whispered, "Is that her?" Beatrice caught sight of her own reflection in the polished airport glass, flushed angry, trembling, no longer composed, but fractured. Something inside her collapsed. She turned and stormed toward the exit, heart pounding, muttering to herself. By the time she got to the parking lot, the video was already online. By evening, it had over 700,000 views. Comments flooded in. "She hasn't learned a thing. This is what privilege looks like when it's cornered." Sad, but not surprising. Beatrice didn't leave her townhouse for 2 weeks. She shut off the news, disabled comments, even considered flying private again, except now no one wanted to lease to her. She felt humiliated, alone, lost. And then one day, in a moment of restless shame, she went for a walk. It was late morning in Miami's design district. She wore oversized sunglasses and kept her head down, hoping no one would recognize her. She wandered into a quiet outdoor cafe, ordered an espresso, sat down to check her emails, and heard a voice behind her. Miss Langford. She turned and froze. It was him. Andre Collins. He stood with the same calm posture, dressed in a casual shirt, dark jeans, and a light jacket. No entourage, no drama. Just the man she'd tried to displace from a seat, now standing in front of her with no trace of vengeance in his eyes. Beatrice's face flushed. "If you're here to record me," she said stiffly, "don't bother. Everyone else already has." "I'm not here to record you," he replied gently. "I'm here because I saw you walk in, and I figured maybe you could use a chair. Where you belong." He gestured to the seat across from her. Something in her cracked open. She hesitated, then sat. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Beatrice's eyes, fixed on her untouched espresso, said quietly, "You've ruined my life." Andre raised an eyebrow. "No," he said. "You did that." She winced. He let the silence stretch, then leaned in. "Let me ask you something," he said. "Why did you need that seat so badly?" Beatrice blinked. "Because I always sit there. It's mine." "No," Andre said. "It's familiar." "That's not the same thing." She looked away. "People like you were taught early that comfort equals entitlement, that access equals ownership. So when something challenges that, when someone you don't expect sits where you expect to be, you call it disrespect, even danger. But really, it's just disruption of a pattern you never questioned." Beatrice's throat tightened. "You're not the first person I've met like that," he continued, "and you won't be the last. But if you're willing to stop defending the person you were and start building the person you want to be, then the story doesn't have to end with disgrace. It can start with decency." She stared at him. For the first time in months, she didn't feel attacked. She felt seen and raw and exposed. "What would you even suggest I do?" she asked, her voice small. Andre leaned back. "Start with listening. Read. Volunteer. Apologize to people who aren't famous, who don't have cameras. Join something that makes you uncomfortable. Show up not to control, but to learn. That's where it begins." She nodded slowly. "Is that what you did?" "I've been doing it my whole life," he said. "That's the difference. Some of us have to." For the first time, Beatrice didn't defend herself. Weeks later, Beatrice Langford quietly enrolled in a course at a local social justice center. She began attending workshops on systemic bias, listening to stories from people she used to dismiss. She volunteered anonymously, donated silently, and even after long hesitation, wrote a public letter of accountability, not apology. She didn't expect forgiveness, but she knew she had to say the words. "I am unlearning," it read, "what the world once told me was normal." It wasn't redemption. Not yet. But it was a start, and for the first time in a long time, Beatrice didn't try to buy her seat back. She earned it one uncomfortable, honest step at a time. Meanwhile, Nova Air continued to soar, this time with purpose. The story of Andre Collins had been studied in business schools, dissected in DEI training, and cited in ethics textbooks. But for those who had lived it, the legacy was quieter, deeper. It was in the eyes of a flight attendant who made space for a wheelchair without being asked, in the voice of a gate agent who took 5 extra seconds to listen to a name she wasn't sure how to pronounce, in the posture of a frequent flyer who for the first time sat next to a stranger and didn't wonder if they belonged. And then, one morning in Zurich, Andre Collins prepared to board another Nova Air flight, this time back to New York. He arrived without an entourage, no cameras, just his briefcase, his carry-on, and the quiet confidence of someone who had turned pain into purpose. At the gate, the agent looked up, recognized him immediately, and offered a warm, unforced smile. "Mr. Collins," she said, scanning his boarding pass, "your seat is ready." He nodded politely, already halfway to the jet bridge when he paused. "I'm curious," he said, turning slightly. "Which seat?" The agent's smile grew. "1B," she replied. "Of course." Andre boarded. As he stepped into the cabin, a young black flight attendant met him at the door. She greeted him by name. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Collins. Seat 1B is ready for you, just like it always should have been." She stepped aside. And for the first time in a very long time, Andre sat, not as a gesture, not as resistance, not as a test, but simply because it was his. Not just a seat, a place. And this time the sky was exactly where he belonged. The story of Andre Collins and Nova Air became more than just a corporate scandal. It became a turning point, a reminder that justice isn't something we wait for. It's something we build together. It showed us that real change doesn't start from policies or statements. It begins when people choose to reflect, to listen, and to grow. Andre's journey revealed that true dignity isn't found in status or wealth or assigned seating. It's in how we treat others when no one's watching and how we own our mistakes when the world is watching. So what about you? If you were in Andre's seat that day, what would you have done if you were in Chloe's shoes? Or even Beatrice's? Would you have the courage to change? If this story made you feel something anger, hope, reflection, leave a comment below. Share your thoughts. Your voice matters. And if you believe the world needs more stories like this, stories of growth, accountability, and the strength to rise above, don't forget to share this video with a friend and subscribe to the channel. Together, let's spread the kind of truth that doesn't need a camera to matter. Thank you for watching and for being part of the change.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.